This nude sometimes either shocks or surprises people, but as Roger said, he felt that Titian and Rubens and people in the past have painted the nude to perfection, and according to his thoughts, he said that Renoir was already beginning to change the shape of the human figure, and he felt to have an impact now that he had to reinvent the human figure, and in some ways you could draw a comparison with de Kooning, who was also at the time, some people fear that it's against women, but he was doing these big abstracty kind of nudes, all teeth and splashy colours, which in a way could be looked as if it was against the beauty of women, but in another way it gave it a vitality. I could never see Roger's or other, de Kooning to come to that, or even Picasso's distortions as being insulting to women. To me, they made them more alive. It was different aspects of their whole body and the way they moved. It's just looking at it in a different way. Looking at her, I should say. Okay. Well, this one is when Roger, his first year in Cornwall. So it could be said to have the boat shapes beginning to come in. That could be the sky. I mean, we don't know what it is really, but there's definitely, it's not so open as some of his, and no bare canvas showing, and an intensity of the forms right close to each other. And altogether, it is his first one influenced by Cornwall, I think. This is a lovely painting. It's so open. Got the three main blue forms. They're again painted very quickly, but with a very strong idea before he embarked on it. Because you can see by the confidence of the charcoal lines that he was one of the first people to use charcoal on bare canvas, although Ben Nicholson had used pencil over his oil paintings, but Roger very much used his drawing ability to have courage and make the marks just where they ought to be. For the end result is a very lively piece of work that stands up even to this day. Roger had his first shows in London, and his work was beginning to be bought by the British Council, which even though he didn't handle success very well, in some ways it gave him confidence to go ahead with this effort to paint a mood or to get to the underlying truths of the situation, which he felt he couldn't do by being a landscape painter or copying a still life. He had to have this vitality and the courage to express it. So here we've got this big chocolatey square or area here, and it's just touching this kind of this oval. It could be a breast, but the way it just touches, it kind of evokes a sort of sensuality, which really he's had great courage to do, because it's not the usual way of evoking a sensual feeling with painting. Because we must remember that painting is a completely different language of its own, and so it can be used not only to describe the visual world, but to describe underlying sensations. And I think Roger was after that, really, in most of his paintings. Here we've got the boat shapes, rather hard-edged this time, and with none of the splashy bits or the charcoal, and just a matter of balance, so that it just makes the viewer feel slightly aware of this, just this bit touching each other, and which, to my mind, gives one a kind of feeling of tension. I think it's kind of least typical of Roger here in this room, because it's probably more like the Terry shapes and other artists, even William Scott, who were using more definite shapes and not depending on the kind of the rough areas that Roger used, and a spontaneous way of painting. Now we come to some smaller paintings, and Roger was very good on a small scale. The content was just as dynamic, and in lots of ways they sat more comfortably, or I was going to say uncomfortably because they're pretty arresting, on people's walls. Some people who paint large sometimes can't manage to get the same kind of action going on in small pictures, but Roger did manage that. And here we have the charcoal and the white and the bits of canvas showing very typically a Hilton picture. The blue is put on quite in a washy kind of manner, and also he's varied the method by tubing the black marks straight on, and altogether it has a freshness about it, which, although it was done very quickly, he probably had to key himself up and find the right moment to actually execute it. And it's as alive now as it was on the day it was painted. Two small pictures, a lot of red in both, painted with 3 years in between them. This was the first one. It's called Little Belter, and you can see why. It's a very successful small painting, the use of 3 different types of red, and there again the canvas showing through and the black lines. I don't suppose he titled it The Little Belter, but whoever owned it obviously thinks it is. And this one is a very beautiful small painting. It has all the elements that made a Roger Hilton painting. The white canvas, the charcoal line put in with authority, the 2 different reds and the scratchy part round the top and the white line put in. And altogether it's a very lively small painting. And the boat shapes are very evident now. He was coming to Cornwall most summers, and he was still using these very earth colours, which were part and parcel of his work at the time. But it's called Savage Landscape, but I'm sure it is the boat motive there, and the landscape probably just comes from the choice of colours, the browns that he used so well. And there again we've got the very varied medium with scratchy marks put straight out of the tube and areas of different browns. But it's quite a powerful painting. Called A Strange Route. I'm sure it's very connected with his time in Cornwall, and it has all the same qualities that make his work so absolutely distinguished as a Roger Hilton painting. It couldn't be by anybody else. I'm just looking at this for quite a long time because I feel it's such a successful painting with the different areas of almost off-whites. This is the bare canvas, here is applied with a palette knife, and this bit is grey washed on, and then it's all held together by this block of black, and then a few charcoal marks, which really is making it a very satisfactory painting to live with. He did sometimes take his abstract paintings to an extreme. I mean, in one of the letters he wrote to Terry Frost, he said that he couldn't go beyond just the white canvas, and so the only way back for him was to use figuration again. So this must have been one of the ones when he had almost got into the extreme form of abstraction, and it wasn't really something that interested him. Well, this one, there's a lot going on in this painting. It's the usual boat shape, and it's called Blue Boat, and it has the usual marks going up the middle and the brown, and it's very much loved by by the owner, who told me that he was a businessman, and when he came in from work it was like greeting a person. It was so lively, and he so much loved it in its originality, and it's for him, for the owner I mean, he said it contained all the inner truths that Roger was so desperately wanting to convey. It was painted between 57 and 58, probably in his Newlyn studio. This is done in 57. It has elements of landscape. It's the year that Roger left Gimpels, and the reason why he left Gimpels in London was because he felt that he could do saleable paintings, and he was very much against doing something that he knew he could do just for money, and he hated being told that Gimpels could sell a certain type of work, so he left in quite a huff, and he was without a gallery after this for a couple of years, and Waddington was definitely after him and kept asking him and said, do I have to write on gold paper to get you to join me? And so eventually Roger did, about 2 years after he painted this picture, and I think he felt much more at ease with that gallery because they didn't demand that he did a certain sort of painting, and he really was one of those painters, Roger was, that couldn't really be asked to paint in a certain way, because he worked so intuitively. This is a wonderfully fresh painting. It's the two blues, and put on very quickly, splashing, and which gives it a kind of feeling of the sea, and it's called Blue Newlyn, and he was getting much more confident in his way of executing the picture quickly to retain its freshness. And it was only because he was so familiar and so good at his technique that he could do this. And so you can see that he's put the the black straight out of the tube here, and all round everything that he's done left the white coming through. There again, this painting is as fresh as the time it was painted. Here's another boat shape. It goes very well with that other one, and it has the use of this brilliant green. It's strange how these shapes suddenly are coming more and more boat shape, but yet they stand up so well as an abstract painting, and all the different flecks of ochre in here, and there's no bare canvas. It's quite heavily worked, this one, but it still has a freshness and a liveliness about it. He used tone in a kind of way using colour as tone. So you've still got the contrast between the dark and the light, but it's done with colour rather than tone. This one I'm very familiar with because I've had it in my home for a long time, and it was one of the last big paintings that Roger did before he started on the gouaches. And it was one of three, same size, all painted on hardboard. There was another abstract, and then on the other one there was a big sort of dancing nude, and I remember it well because I had to take it up to Waddington's night, wrapped in blankets and on my roof rack, and I just kept hoping that it would get there safely, and it did. And I was quite sorry to see it go, really, but I did hang on to this one. He's used the actual hardboard surface as a colour, and so that this has been put in the white, and these marks that he's made on top. I suppose he felt he couldn't do better than leave this as a colour in itself. It's a lovely use of grey and ochre. There was a similar one that he did, which I think won the UNESCO prize of this year with the same kind of greys. And this looks to me like it was done very much at the same time. It's just the shapes underneath that could be sky, this could be the shapes underneath, and this line across. Just a lovely painting. This was done in metallic. He put a kind of wash on the canvas, but a very, very slight one. And there again, he was doing these shapes which were anthropomorphic, really. And this could be breasts, it could be testicles, it could be part of the human figure, and yet made into in a kind of abstract way. He's put this brown straight from the tube and the authoritative charcoal lines. And even though these are very marked circles, they don't seem to dominate particularly the painting. It seems to all be part of the same visual impact. To 75, 1975, he was confined to bed, and he set up a system of working from his bed, and he mostly worked through the night, and this is how the night letters happened, because he left me a shopping list for the morning and various instructions, just very humorous very often. And he did these amazing gouaches, which could be looked as like, they were mostly to do with things that were happening, but they were also related to the time that he spent with Constant and in Paris, belonging to the Cobra group. They had something in common with those. This one was a birthday card or Christmas card, but he treated it in such a decorative way. I have it all the time in this one, because I had to have a break from him, because he was not appreciating all my huge efforts on his behalf, and also I was looking after the boys as well, so I took a couple of weeks off and went to Florida, and got other people, neighbours, to look in on him, And anyway, he apparently said to people, it's not everybody that can afford to send their wife off on a holiday to Florida. He changed it round. He was really rather furious that I'd gone off. And this one is my wife eaten by a crocodile, he hoped, I think. Although he was all the time sending telegrams for me to come back immediately. This is kind of a droll picture because it says from your beloved hubby. and this is an amusing, he loved things that, fire engines, and when we had water laid in our cottage in the pipes, and he loved all the JCBs that dug up the garden, and he drew quite a lot of pictures of them. This is 74, a year before Roger died, and there's just in these paintings the beginning of the black bird appearing. In Van Gogh's paintings, before he died, before he committed suicide, the black bird appeared. And this is just a year before Roger died, and with a whole lot of these paintings, we see this black bird here. Here's a black tree with a few birds in it. But then, by contrast, there's this joyous bit of almost looking seed-like underneath, and here the earth growing with all these things, life happening. So even if the black bird was a symbol of death, there's still a lot of vitality going on. There's a black bird appearing here, but somehow or other, with all the density and the connections with nature, there's still an eye on magnificent composition, and he knew exactly where he was placing things for a dynamic, lively effect. And he did all these from his bed. We all had to help. He had a bell system, 3 for Fergus to go and change his paint water, and 2 for Beau to go and play chess, and 1 for me for conversation. And anyway, that didn't last long. It lasted about a year. But we had to really be there for him so that he could go on doing these. But in the night, he had to look after himself. So I made sure that he had all the stuff, or tried to make sure that he needed. And his whiskey, of course. I had an amazing shopping list. It was also full of wonderful things. And sometimes I used to rush into Penzance, and it was Lipton's at that time, not the Co-op. And get 7 bottles of whiskey, 500 Woodbines, and the ladies in the checkout hardly sort of turned a hair, but it was an amazing weekly list. Well, it wasn't the list actually, it was just what he told me to get, and the lists were much more exotic. Anyway, I must talk more about these. What can I say except that they are so beautiful, and they're full of colour and life. And somehow or other, the iller he got and the weaker he got, his paintings became more joyful. Here's, again, it could be caterpillars, it could be anything drawn from nature. Wonderful colours, liveliness. Because he couldn't anymore go up to his studio, he didn't stop working ever. And even the time that he was painting in oils, in my experience with Roger, he'd get up in the morning, and with his morning coffee, he always drew a lot. It was just part of his personality to express himself. And this one, this very familiar one, we have it at home a lot. It could be a body shape, or it could be that very modern shape of a peach or a pear cut in half. It's organic, and the colours are organic, and the way he's put it, composed it, has its own dynamism. And he also was very conscious of the 4 sides of the paper that he was working. So the composition, there again, he wouldn't have called it composition, but the way he placed the lines within the area that he had to work in is very important. And they kind of express a mood here. There's a couple here, they could be dancing, they could be arguing, and yet it has a room for the viewer to make up their own mind. You know, it isn't copied and it isn't photographic at all. It just has the feeling of two people being involved with each other, and he hasn't limited himself to just the ordinary visual way that we see things. He's used his mind as well and his feeling about that, and you could say that about quite a few of them. Well, obviously these very gentle little abstracts are so, I mean landscapes, I meant to say, landscapes are very beautiful, and even then Roger's always conscious where he places the line. This is a lovely gentle nude. I think it was in one of his sketchbooks and he gave it to somebody, or and it's very treasured by this collector. It's more sculpture. I mean, here, down here, I think this is very witty drawing because it has the two figures and yet it has kind of part in the middle there that is almost like a part of the human female, and it's just the whole thing is very conscious of the spaces in between. Witty, I would say. And that's a kind of strange one up there. There again, it's got some of the anxiety about it, I feel. She may be complaining, this woman, but anyway, it's still got the lack of being academic and going for the liveliness. This is an early lithograph. He didn't do many, and it was done before I knew Roger. Very beautiful. And here's one done on the back of an envelope. He often used that. Very sensitive, lovely drawing. I think this drawing here relates a lot to his oil paintings. It has the same sense of dealing with shapes and the sudden line. I think by drawing continually, he kept his hand in, and even though a lot of these drawings were done when he was still oil painting, and so he used to do them early in the morning before he went off to his studio. This one is quite humorous. It's almost a cat-like woman, and there is a lot of humour in Roger's pictures, and you do wonder in his drawings what sometimes you can see so many meanings in them. It almost could be two figures here, two women, but that's the joy of it, that they're not immediately readable. This one looks a bit like a Henry Moore sculpture. Once he's freed himself from being academic, I mean, there's endless possibilities of arranging shapes within the four sides of the paper, and he does that so well. It does rather expand the possibilities of art rather than drawing them in. Nice drawing, and that one. And then this lovely bird, very bird-like. Roger was very keen on animals, and when we went to France in his last year, I hired a wheelchair from the hospital, local hospital, and used to wheel him down onto the front at Antibes, and he used to watch a little circus there every day. And so when this bunch of animals that he's doing, and you can see in the gouache there, came really from that experience. That's our family dog, Wogs, really called Wogs because we had him when the children were very young and they used to call him something like Dog Wog, and so he got stuck with that name. And it's more doggy than a photograph of a dog. I mean, the expression and the way he looks as if he's going to jump up and run any minute. This is a joyful gouache. It's been used, it was in that exhibition Alive to It All, and it was hanging by a Miro in that show that Julian Spalding did, and it really held its own. The symbols in it, I'm not quite sure what they are. They could be hills, a child under a table, a very beautiful gouache. I don't really quite know what that is about, except that there's an animal here and that one, and a woman, a nude, running away. Don't blame her. Probably had too much to do. And here's a lovely, lovely one, also in Antibes, with the tiger and the elephant. I think, although it was only 6 months before he died when we went to Antibes, and I didn't think he'd make it over there, but we hired a little plane from Land's End that just did coastal flights, and somehow Roger managed to persuade the captain to take him down to the south of France, and we just all arrived there on one day and then just got into this little Apache Piper plane, and next minute we were in Antibes. He did have the power to get people to obey him. This one was on the wall of the last week of his work. When Roger died, I got somebody to come in and take a photograph of the room as it was when he died, and this was one of the gouaches that was pinned up. Every week when he executed quite a lot of work, he used to get me to pin them up week by week so that he could look at them for a day or two, and then I'd take them down and store them in a chest of drawers. And this was one of the very last ones he painted. Full of joy still. No blackbird this time. And here's one of the boats. The boats are very interesting in Roger's work because in mythology they have a symbolic meaning from the material world to the spiritual world. I don't know that's why he used them so often in his paintings and in these gouaches, but they were definitely connected with some kind of journey for Roger. It could be the material to the spiritual, or it could be just escape or adventure. Here's another one about growth, I think it is anyway. It's like seeds, plants just springing out. And this one I'm very fond of. I have it hanging at home. It's Roger's journey, I think, on a boat again, and kind of perhaps the sea and the whole things that go on underneath, and there he is. To me, my mind anyway, it's the journey, I call it, that one. Yes, but probably not the right, because he had a stroke and then he just lasted 30 hours, so he wouldn't have known then, but he did know. And we found this letter under his bed, one of his night letters, that said, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." And then it suddenly went on to Adam and Eve pinched me, went down the sea to bathe. He had this kind of quirky humour as well. So even though he did know, he wasn't entirely miserable about it, his death, I don't think. He didn't want to die, but I think the whole experience of, he said that the war took 10 years off his life. I don't know about that. He did march all the way through Germany, but it was most probably the drinking and smoking as much as anything, yeah.